Okay, so this is a tutorial on how to make things glow as requested by my dear friend Rose. Uh, they're one of the first people to commission me and one who's supported me for quite a while, so a giant thank you to you for all kinds of things. So, we've got a candle, we've got a Christmas light. First, just banged out some line art, added flat colors, nothing particularly interesting, found some references, and I added where the object's glow is kind of coming from. So the brightest points on the wick and then the filaments there. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up a normal layer and just start making the flame color, which, looking at candles, I have one on my desk I'm kind of referencing. They have a very orange-yellow kind of gold flame, as opposed to the Christmas light, which, just looking at a normal clear Christmas light, it has a very yellow kind of tone to it, and much, I feel like, sharper kind of looking color to it. So, alright, gonna go in and build the flame. What I typically use is I use my uneven watercolor layering brush. It's just my favorite brush. It's what I tend to use for all of my art in general. So, got the kind of base orange color down. We're going to add the blue part at the bottom where it's hottest. And then we're going to erase a little bit of the interior because there's kind of this weird vacuum almost of color if you're looking at a candle flame. And then we're just going to kind of go in and intensify that flame color. And all this is on just a normal layer. I've got it labeled base color light on here. And everything's going to start out on the same couple of layers on here, but then it's going to kind of split because I didn't have as much control as I wanted to with everything kind of sitting on the same couple of layers. I work with a ton of layers. It's probably why I've blown out two of my Surface Pros, along with just the heatsink problems I have in general. But I use a lot of layers because I like to have a lot of control, and I like to use a lot of nuance in my paintings and things. So that's why we have about 1 million different layers we're going to go through here. So next, got the flame done. It's kind of rounded at the top. Candle flames aren't actually like pointed. They're going to be kind of round. Seriously, just light a candle and look at it. And look at how it burns and use that as reference. That's what I did. And then I also got a picture of a candle in a dark room that I kind of used as reference for this too. But in moving on here to the Christmas light, it's going to have a very bright, pale yellow kind of pool of light that's going to end up around it here. I'm still using the uneven layering watercolor brush, just setting it a bit bigger. I'm going to lay down that pale saturated yellow, and then make a larger, less dense circle right around it. Make a brighter shine at the filament here with a smaller circle, and then add that kind of starburst pattern that you see scattering off of lights that are artificial lights that have that much brighter burn to them. I remember reading somewhere at some point that the reason that like lights and stars look like they have spikes is because of actually scratches on your cornea that happen just naturally as you age, which I think is kind of an interesting idea, and I really like that starburst kind of shape. I think it adds a romantic sort of twinkling effect to things as opposed to like the very soft glow that a candle would have. And you'll see me work on the candle glow here in a few moments, and that'll be just all one pale pool of light. So we've got that kind of laid down. What's going to happen next year is I'm going to actually replicate that base color light layer and apply Gaussian blur. I have a filter that actually does it for me that I can slide up and down in Clip Studio Paint to do that. You can use just the blending function on your program, whatever you're using, if you don't have a filter available. I like the filter just because it makes an exact replication just blurrier, and it saves me a lot of time. So we've got that replicate in there. that creates the glow around things. It's kind of like, it's exactly what I did to make the text glow at the top there. And check it against that lights out layer. Everything is way too intense. So I'm changing that duplicated layer to a glow layer. I'm moving it underneath the original base light color layer. And I'm just kind of checking the opacity, looking at it. And what's eventually going to happen here is that I'm actually going to separate the flame and the Christmas lights into separate layers, making sure to erase everything as needed so I don't have duplications, and checking it against this lights out layer again to make sure everything's erased. Again, if I streamline my process a bit better, I wouldn't need to do that, but I ended up having to. So that's why I'm doing that, so I can have more control and actually kind of show you what I was doing a little bit easier. I'm also going to convert this normal base color layer over to a soft light layer, just to give me a little bit more control over how intense everything is. And again, that's all a matter of taste. I like building soft washes of color on individual layers, as opposed to going in all at once. Personal preference all the way. So what I'm going to end up doing next year is I'm going to go back to working on the candle flame. The candle flame will have a, will go in and create a overlay layer to add some saturated orange to the sides of the flame. An overlay layer, what it is, it's just like those, like an animation cell sheet. It's completely clear and the colors just lay over the top of whatever's underneath them. So I like using that to add lighting effects. I like to use that to add subtle washes of color. I commonly use that to throw a lot of things on my paintings, just because I feel like it gives me a little bit more control than trying to blend everything in one layer. But again, I really, really, really like my layers, so this may not apply. Create that overlay layer, add that saturated orange, and then after you see me add this saturated orange to the sides of the candle flame, because I noticed at the sides of my candle flame that happened to be something that was going on. I'm going to actually create another glow layer over the top of it and go over that orange color again with a larger version of that soft brush. Add that color in there. Give it a little bit more glow. And then I'm also going to go over that candle flame on that glow layer with the orange, with the original yellow-orange kind of light color that I use for the candle flame, just to create this really bright, fiery kind of glow. And at one point I'll decide that the candle flame is too wide, so I'm going to erase a little bit of that orange so that it's not as obvious. Alright, so next we are creating the pool of light around that flame here. So I'm just going to an empty normal layer, and what I'm going to end up doing here is actually converting it over to another overlay layer. And I'm going to create a pool of light around the flame with that original flame color. Check it on the lights out layer. Way too bright. So lower the opacity of that overlay layer with the pool of light on it as you see fit, to your taste, whatever the lighting is like in the room for you. And then I'm going to continue building on that overlay layer with that same color at the sides of the circle of light here, because it seems like it's brighter at the sides as opposed to up top for whatever reason here. Alright, so we've got kind of the basics of the pool of light down. It looks pretty cool, glowing, but that stark, dead, flat-colored candle is kind of ruining the effect for us. Whenever you have a white taper wax candle, wax is not opaque unless there's a lot of it. So you need to show the light filtering through the wax, and you need to show the shadow where that light filtering stops. So what I'm just doing here is I just took a complementary, that means opposite on the color wheel, color to the original candle flame color. I just saturated it, meaning I made it more dingy gray, and then I darkened it, just picking out of the color picker. I'm sorry, it doesn't show that on here. And then just add shading to that candle past where that light flame would permeate. And then I'm just going to clean up the edges with my hard-edged eraser so it doesn't look weird here with the shadow spilling off. And then I'm going to make the light permeating the candle wax with a new add glow layer that's placed above those shadow layers and the flat layer, but below all of those pool of light layers. So you'll still see that pool of light color over the top of this, because think of it as stacking. The light casts onto the object, so you need to stack those light layers above the object because the light is acting upon that object. So I'm using the pale yellow color that I kind of used for the pool of light a little bit. Since it's a white candle, there's no real color, and white candles aren't necessarily white. This one's kind of an off-white color. So do that and add that in there, and then what you're going to see me do is I'm going to add a duller version of that original orange kind of flame color between the bright yellow spots on the candle where that light's shining through brightest, and the blue shadow colors on the candle where it's not showing through at all. Just to kind of act as a bridge in between the two, kind of blend everything together a little bit better. And then I'm going to actually continue building that orange color between the light and the dark on the candle, using an overlay layer on top of that add glow layer, and just kind of blend. So the candle looks pretty great. I mean, it looks pretty passable at this point. I'm actually going to go in here and just add some atmosphere around the candle on a new shadow layer that is above the candle shadow layer, but below all of the light layers and below all of the light permeating the candle layers here. And I'm just going to do that same thing that I did with the candle shadow. I'm going to use a color complementary to the original candle flame color, put some of that down after I desaturate it and just make it a little bit more gray, a little less blue, and then as I get further away from the candle flame, just keep darkening it and making it more and more gray and closer to black, to show that, as the atmosphere is further away from the candle, the atmosphere isn't being acted upon by that light. So it's going to be a lot less easier to kind of see any color or discern anything about it. Then once we got all that done, what's actually going to happen here is I'm actually going to go in and adjust the line art. I separate the two line arts onto two separate layers. They were originally on the same layer, erasing as needed so I don't have any duplicates on here, so that I can adjust the opacity of the line art as I see fit individually on the two objects. So you can, again, if you're better organized than I am, skip that step and have all your line art for your separate objects in different layers, or you can leave it as is. Whatever floats your boat, honestly. So go in, erase that to show that the defining edges of the candle are being kind of distorted by all that light coming through it, but make sure you don't erase too much or it'll just start to look kind of weird. So at that point, we're kind of done with the candle. The candle looks pretty great. What I'm going to go ahead and do is actually separate all of the candle lighting layers into a separate folder to avoid getting confused. That's just organizational kind of things for my benefit, and move the original kind of soft light layer that we started all of this on for the candle flame and everything to above all of that, so we can actually work on that Christmas light here without having too many problems. And then kind of erase and adjust as needed. It ended up being too bright with that soft layer, or soft light layer on top, so I just erased where the original candle flame was kind of sketched out. Alright, so moving on to the Christmas light here. And what I'm kind of putting down here is that this sort of lighting for the Christmas light will work on electronic artificial light sources, and then if you have something like bioluminescence or glow in the dark or whatever, or candles, you can reference kind of what I did for the candle flame instead. Because they do have, one's a lot sharper and a lot brighter than the other, and one's a lot more diffuse and a lot softer. So what I'm doing here is I actually created a new add glow layer for the highlights in the Christmas light bulb. Highlights are going to occur in the part of that light bulb closest to the viewer. There's a few different surfaces here that you're acting on. There's one at the very tip on that ball. There's one where the bulb starts to curve in to make that cone on the tip of the cylinder here, and then there's one in the main body of that bulb. And I'm also going to add the highlight to the lip of the light socket here to show that light from the object acting upon that light socket there. I'm going to go in and check it against that lights off layer, and it's starting to look a little bit more like a Christmas light, you know, a little bit, but still have a lot of tweaking to do here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually, while I'm on that lights off layer, just so I can see it a little better, I'm going to create a overlay layer and add a deeper saturated version of that original light color that I used for the pool of light for the light bulb to the inside of that light bulb to show light bouncing around inside of that light bulb as it's being created. And I've created this overlay layer between the bulb highlights on the outside of the bulb and the original pool of light layer that we created, and all of that's above that thing that's casting the light layer. It's just, again, keep thinking of layers as things are sandwiched, you know, on top of and in between each other. Whenever the light is being cast, the light hits your eye first, your brain does all the processing of it. You will see the air that the light's traveling through, then the surface of the bulb, then the interior of the bulb, then the filament. Think of it as layers. It will help a lot. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm just tweaking that bulb lighting and highlights with an eraser, and then I'm also erasing the line art slightly around the bulb just to demonstrate that it's a clear glass bulb. It doesn't have a harsh outline necessarily. Everything here is done in kind of my style, which is this weird hybrid between realistic and, I don't want to say cartoony, but you get my point. So this may not apply to you. You may not use line art. The point is to have no super harsh edges on here. So I'm going to create a new add glow layer on top of all of the other layers. Use a watercolor brush with some visible bristles to make a starburst pattern around that light. So make sure that they do come to points, because they do light up a strand of Christmas lights. If you have them, or find reference images to kind of see what I'm talking about on here. It's something I didn't even think about until I started doing this, and it looks strange without it. So go ahead and create that, and then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to duplicate the layer that I first made that kind of starburst pattern on, and then I'm going to hit it with that Gaussian blur again. And then I'm going to go back to the original starburst layer and then lower the opacity until you can't see the brush strokes here. So, next up, we're going to go ahead and make a new overlay layer to build on that pool of light that's around the bulb here. Just using a big, soft spray can brush for that here, because it is a much more even light than the candle flame would cast. So I want that very artificial, even kind of light. And using that original pool of light color that I had there. And then now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in and I'm actually going to start adding shadow to that Christmas light socket. How I'm going to go ahead and do that is I'm going to create a new normal layer, or rather typically what I do is on top of the flats I create a new normal layer and then just start putting in a darker desaturated version of the original socket color, because the socket does have such an intense color, it is going to affect the shadow quite a bit. So I like to go in with a darker desaturated version of that first to add the first layer of shadow, and then I'll go back and do the same thing that I did with the candle, which is I'll take a complementary color to the original candlelight, or not candlelight, but Christmas light shine color, and then I will paint over those shadows again with that desaturated dark blue kind of color to kind of keep building those shadows. Again, typically I do both of those things on a separate layer that is not the flats layer, but I rushed through things and I accidentally started coloring on the flats layer. So it's just the dark desaturated blue that's on a separate layer here from the color flats. Again, you don't have to work on all these separate layers. I just prefer to. I think it gives me more control. And don't forget the shadow that is actually inside that light socket there. You'll see a dark point if you're looking into a Christmas light closely inside that light socket there. Alright, so I'm going to go back to working on the atmosphere, create a new normal layer, add that atmosphere around the Christmas light just like we did with the candle, dark desaturated version of that original light color to create that darkness around the lights here. And then once I kind of have that laid down, and I'm again using a big soft spray can brush for that, just like I did with the pool of light layer on the Christmas light, just because I do want that evenness. I don't want it to appear uneven because it does cast such a bright, even light here. Check it against the lights off layer, and then I'm just going to tweak things as I see fit. I adjusted the bulb highlights and turned the lights off layer back on at a lower opacity to really kind of set the atmosphere in here. And at that point, it's just kind of checking things as you see fit, honestly. It's a matter of taste. It's a matter of what the atmosphere is that you're trying to create. You don't have to go through absolutely all of these steps unless you're doing a close-up of the bulbs. You can kind of truncate them a little bit if you're just have some candlelight in the background. But I hope this was helpful. I'm planning on creating a text-based version of this for things too, but that will come after I finish up this one for the video. But either way, hope you enjoyed. Like, subscribe. If this was helpful, tell me so. If it wasn't helpful, tell me so. Go nuts. It's chaos. Be kind, and enjoy the rest of your day.